You're listening to The Sister Trill with Danae and Kiveli.
Hi everybody and welcome back to The Sister Trill. I'm Kiveli.
And I'm Danae.
And today's episode is going to be all about fighting. Mainly our fights and how we fought when we were younger, whether we're fighting today or one could even say that we're fighting or more disagreeing, kind of the evolution of our fights, some of our, I would say, most tragic fights and how we now kind of have found a way to deal with it, and I would say fight in a way that's extremely constructive and kind of avoid most fights to start with. So before we get into all of this, I was actually trying to remember.
Should we say what we disagreed on?
Oh, yes, we should. You're very, yes, right. Okay, yeah. First, very on topic with the theme.
Yes.
Let's start with what we disagreed on this week.
Okay, so my thing is a bit of a story. I want to get into it just for a minute.
Okay.
So basically, there were two situations this week where we disagreed on the... You're looking at me so shocked.
I don't remember.
Where we disagreed on the timing of when to do... an email / phone call in order to resolve a situation that was there. There were two independent situations, and in both cases, I was on the side of let's do it as fast as possible because they were both a little bit like uncomfortable situation, a bit crucial situations. And I said, let's get this done as quickly as possible. Let's try to call. If we don't reach anybody, let's write an email or a message or whatever to get it done. And in both situations, I mean, Kiveli is generally on the more in the camp of doing it a bit later or in general waiting for the phone call, like for the discussion rather than the email. But in both situations, we were then contacted by the other person, and the thing that we were scared of, let's say, had happened because the thing had already happened and we didn't catch them in time. No, yesterday as well.
No, because that situation has not resolved itself yet, and that was actually the one that I wanted to say about. Well, basically, the main.
Just to finish this little fight. Which, I mean, it wasn't a fight, but this is something that we disagree on quite a lot.
It's actually the same thing that I wanted to say. I only had a different situation in mind that was quite similar. No, basically the main disagreement comes from the fact that I prefer when there is like a more uncomfortable thing to be asked, maybe because it is something we hadn't communicated before, or a kind of urgent situation that has risen unexpectedly. I'm usually a fan of communicating this on the phone or somehow verbally with a direct connection, because I feel that when you talk to people and you have their direct reaction, it's much more natural, and I find it also easier to then talk about uncomfortable or, as I said, like things that are not 100% easy breezy. I kind of find it easier when you have them on the phone. The tone of your voice also conveys information and emotion, and I prefer to maybe wait, I don't know, 10, 12 hours or maybe wait one day to kind of get the chance to do it on the phone rather than kind of directly write a message and do it a bit less personally and kind of risk certain emotions being lost in translation. I prefer waiting this 24-hour period and then calling.
But in this situation, the whole thing was that we needed to catch that person before someone else did, and we didn't.
Well, but it was still fine. But I'm just saying, I understand. No, but it's always kind of a balance. I just prefer to kind of give it a little bit of extra time, hoping to get the phone call, and of course, sometimes waiting that time doesn't work out.
I totally understand the phone call thing. Like, I think that's a very valid thing. That you say you want to hear the tone of the voice and everything. I just think the problem with the phone call is that more often than not, you don't reach the person. When you call someone, I would say more often than not, they don't pick up. So then you're right where you started. You haven't communicated what you wanted to communicate.
No, but the person knows you want something.
Yeah, and but also very often they don't call back.
Yeah, but you can start. I mean, I would then just write like, hey, can we have a phone call the next day? Right. Specifically. And keep it, whatever, mysterious.
And
to then have
this is the point where I'm like, okay, let's get the whole subject out.
And many times, to be honest, I've had the experience that if you ask them for a phone, like, hey, it's urgent, could we have a phone call? When are you free tomorrow? Then you do get the phone call. And then I just think that you're actually more comfortable doing it per text than per phone.
Depends on the situation.
But
there are some
most
things...
of the times I actually feel more comfortable doing it on the phone, and you would prefer writing it out.
I mean, it really depends on the situation. There are some things where I feel like it's important to have them in writing, just because they're agreements, and then later on, I don't want the person to be able to say,
absolutely.
Oh, but you said that on the phone.
We kind of already in a previous disagreement had settled on the fact that you do the phone call first, and then you kind of confirm in writing, which I totally
So this is why I find writing is very important. And then depending on the situation, if it's like a bit of a conflict, sometimes I think the phone is better because of exactly what you said. But sometimes I also feel like it's good to do it in writing because you have the structured form. You can structure your thoughts, especially if it's a bit more complex. You can put all of it in there, and it's not going to be this heated discussion. I feel like it's easier to somehow put it all in there in a nice tone without it getting super uncomfortable. But it really depends on the situation.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I kind of feel that if you give, if it's something uncomfortable and you give people the chance to kind of mull it over in their heads more and more and more, people tend to get, I would say, more combative in the time before they reply, rather than if you talk to them immediately. Because if you talk to them immediately, people are far, I would say, more reluctant to be kind of mean or somehow unkind to someone's face
I understand.
than in writing.
Yeah.
So that's why I prefer the kind of face-to-face verbal communication.
Anyway.
All right. Okay, so what I was thinking of when I was structuring this episode is that I was trying to remember how we used to fight, or what we used to fight about when we were really young. And I have to say that I kind of was like blanking or spacing on the way we used to fight up until we were maybe like 7 and 11, 6 and 10, like these first years. Do you remember? So I wanted to ask you, what was the relationship like? Because what I kind of remembered was that up until I was 4 years old and I started playing the piano, you and I had much more distance, because you were already playing the piano, and I was kind of more hanging out with our nanny or something like that, playing a game, and you were all kind of doing your program that involved practicing and playing the piano and going to concerts. So maybe you, as the older one, have more memory of those really first years.
I mean, the earliest fights that I remember, I don't know if that's necessarily before 7 and 11, though. But they are also a bit physical in the way that young children fight in a physical way. I remember some, pulling hair being involved, some scratching or fingernails in the skin, this type of thing. But, always in a still, I think, totally okay manner for young girls. But this is what I remember. And I remember, either our mom or our dad pulling us apart being like, this is not how we fight, girls.
Yeah, you remember that?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So
because the first fights that I remember, and actually maybe that is an early one. Actually, I just remember it because we have this video recording of it. Is generally, I would say that my fighting style is more. I don't want to put a negative twist on yours. Mine is more honest and vulnerable, and yours is more keeping your shields up and kind of never letting on if you are hurt or if you are in any way kind of not insecure about something. So I remember many times that the situation was that we would kind of fight about something or have a disagreement, and then I would kind of officially be sad about it, and I would be like, no, I don't want to talk to you anymore, I'm sad, and I would go and make a point out of walking by myself, very, very dramatically and playing by myself somewhere, and you would always pretend like nothing happened. You would be like, no, everything is okay, and I'm like, no, nothing is okay. And I would be like actually, show my hurt, and you would be kind of very pretending to be, I assume, very okay with it. Do you remember that?
I mean, I know which video you're talking about, because it's a family home video that we have. And in that situation, I feel like I was pretending in order not to get in trouble. Because I think that when our dad was saying what happened, and you were like, and Danae fought with me, or Danae hurt me, or I don't know exactly what you said.
I don't remember what it was, actually.
But, I mean, obviously we were fighting about nothing. Yeah. But I feel like I was just like, no, everything's fine, Kiveli. everything's fine just to not be in trouble.
But that is generally, it's a bit like, I feel if I think about our fights before we, started talking about our disagreements and really reflecting on our respective bad and good habits within fighting, I feel like very many times I don't know whether we were both equally hurt or not. I think I'm definitely the more, I would say, verbally sensitive, not maybe actually sensitive, but verbally sensitive of us two. And I feel that many times I would kind of, genuinely be distraught, and you would just pretend like it didn't touch you, like it didn't really bother you that much.
Are you talking about early fights still?
I'm talking, like maybe not 5 and 9 or something, but I'm talking about fights when we were, like up until you were maybe 13 or 14.
And what were those fights about?
About anything, like generally I just feel like you could switch gears so quickly. I mean, that's something that you generally have.
Yeah, for sure.
We would have had this disagreement or something, and things would have been said, and I would be like, traumatized for about an hour, and you would just like switch gears, and I would like, wait, what? Hang on.
I mean, to be very honest, I feel like those fights, especially in that age, like when you were 8 and I was 12, for example, for me were more like, I felt like, in a way, like you were my child. I mean, in a very, if that's not a nice thing to say, but, I felt like I had that role, and like I also kind of had to have that role because of the circumstances. So I feel like when you say I switched gears so quickly, I think it's because I felt in some very abstract way as a parent who was teaching you something, and then it was like, okay, now this is done. Now let's go on with happy life. And I feel like especially at that age, I didn't feel like, okay, you're hurting me, I'm hurting you, and now we're making up. It was like, okay, this had to happen, and somehow this was my way to, of dealing with it. And now, let's go on.
Because I remember I always used to feel like somehow you were less affected. You were less affected by the fight, and I felt like, wow, like maybe. And then it kind of made me feel a bit like a drama queen, like like okay, maybe I'm not allowed, I'm not supposed to be as affected by it. But it's interesting. I mean, obviously we've spoken about it a lot. So, do you think that either you or me used to get our way more in fights?
That's a good question. I mean, really depends on, I think, the subject.
Okay. So, in what situations do you feel that I got my way more, for example?
I feel like when we were away from home and it was about piano practice.
Then I got my way?
I feel like you got your way.
Really?
More. I feel like, because as we had mentioned already in a previous episode, I was not only in charge of my piano practice, but also in charge of Kiveli's piano practice. This is why I felt like your mom, basically.
No, I mean, it's totally clear that you felt like my mom, because our mom very much instilled in you this idea.
I was in charge.
You were in charge.
Yeah,
it wasn't just the piano practice. It was the
everything.
Brushing the hair, brushing the teeth, going to sleep appropriately, and everything.
I feel like in those situations when you didn't want to, you just didn't want to. And I mean, I tried many things, like from super crazy things to to like, just trying to like sensibly talk to you. But I feel like when you just didn't want to, you just said, yeah. And this was also kind of always your character, no matter what I said, like, no, but then, you're not going to play well next week, or like, oh no, but this, you were just like, yeah, okay. Like, you didn't care.
I have to say that I don't think we've actually ever really reminisced about that time. So I'm for the first time hearing it from your perspective, which makes so much sense. Because from my perspective, I think the main kind of source of the fights back then was that I always tried to see you as an equal, and you always saw me as someone to take care of and kind of direct, which totally understandable. And in these situations, I remember how it felt. I remember you would tell me, especially the things that I didn't want to do. I remember you would tell me, Kiveli, let me brush your hair, and I was like, no, but it hurts. I don't want to. I don't want you to brush my hair. Like, let me have it that way. Or you would say, like, Kiveli, go practice, and I'd be like,
there are these pictures of you with like super unbrushed hair, which shows what the result was of the fight.
I would like to point out that fast forward like 20 years, and I've now found a way to handle with my hair that does not involve brushing.
no, of
Because
course.
this hair is not made for brushing,
But I mean-
because it hurts when you brush them, and it doesn't make any sense.
I didn't know that back then.
No, I know. And you do still actually brush your hair much more than I. Not brush, you...
I comb it.
Comb my hair, but
When
you
it's
know,
wet.
I don't even comb my hair. I mean, okay, when it's wet, but you comb your hair significantly more often than I do.
When it's wet, when I wash it.
Okay. So I remember that. And I have to say, I don't think I've ever, I always tended to see the whole situation very much from, I would say, no one understands me. That was very often my position when I was, because I was the youngest, and it was like, no one takes me seriously, no one understands me, and no one lets me make my own decisions, and I always felt like, why would you not let me make my own decisions? But now hearing you say that, you were trying to kind of, like you would with a child, like find techniques to make it enjoyable. I remember those techniques.
Yeah.
I remember you would try to invent all these like, stories behind it and get in like role play and everything. And sometimes it would work. Sometimes I would find it so enjoyable that I would then be a part of it. I remember we even had like some of these roles established firmly. Do you remember, okay, that is like a little sweet side story. Do you remember your hand character?
Oh, yes,
to make me do my scale?
Yes,
my scales?
Of course, I remember.
So now you're such a good big sister. It's amazing. You were such a good big sister. Okay, basically, we still do. When we start practicing every day, we play scales. Now I really enjoy doing it. It kind of makes my fingers wake up. I feel really good. But when I was 7, 8, and 9 and 10 years old, I hate it. I really disliked doing scales. It was boring. It didn't have anything to do with like music.
Yeah.
It was repetitive. It was the same thing every day. So that was the part I disliked the most. And I remember you kind of invented this character of the scale hand or something, and you would kind of hide behind. At that point, we didn't even have a grand piano.
It was only an upright.
We only had our upright piano, and I remember you would kind of go behind the piano and like just have that hand up and like make that like high voice that would kind of interact with me. And now we do this thing, and now maybe try to play it a bit better, and now maybe play it one more time, and now the right hand. And I loved it, and I remember I loved it so much that every time I wanted to do scales, I was like, okay, but only if Danae does the hand.
Only with the hand.
And then every time you would have to do the hand. Wow.
That was a good one, but I also had some crazy things that, I don't know if you remember this, but the
voice,
which
oh
was like the negative side of the hand character, which was like, I think, you weren't doing something that I thought you should do, and then I just pretended that the deep voice took over, and I was like, "You have to do it."
I remember it, of course. Yeah, I remember as well.
Completely insane. And at the beginning, you were actually, I don't know if you remember. In the beginning, you were obviously scared, and you were like, "Okay." And at the end of the day, I don't know if you like took up all your courage or if you were thinking about it all the time, but you came to me and you said, "Danae, I know that this voice is like you're pretending." You said like, "I know that this is not real." And I was like, yeah, okay, it's not.
I remember that. Yeah. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I had totally forgotten about that kind of aspect of it. And it's super cool, actually, to hear from you that it was like out of love from your side. Because I think it's very easy as the younger sibling and generally to kind of always feel misunderstood. Because in a way, there is also some validity to the perspective of why don't you let me make my own mistakes?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And I get that in this situation, you kind of felt you were not allowed to let me make my own mistakes. But nevertheless, like, all these things that you tried, I do remember that I was also sometimes quite exasperating, like, as a person. But it was, the reason why I was so exasperating is because I really always felt like I didn't have the freedom to make my own choices.
Yeah.
We're talking about like literally when most children don't have the freedom to make their own choices,
like literally brushing your teeth, yes or no, putting on your pajamas,
yes
or no, because Kiveli liked to sleep in her regular day clothes. These kind of choices we're talking about right now.
Yeah, no, basically it
washing your face.
No, here was the main thing. What I disliked is and it's something I dislike doing to this day. And the clothes and the teeth were just metaphors or symbols for this main thing is I disliked doing something because someone told me I had to do it, or because it was a habit, like because doing something because it is the way most people do it never was a good enough explanation to me. So whenever it was something like that, I had to kind of find out for myself why most people do it that way. You know, why it makes sense to put on your pajamas before you go to bed and not sleep in your clothes because you're more comfortable, you feel safer, you feel, all these things. So, and with all the things, and I never liked, and I feel like because I was kind of always a very kind of questioning person, like I would question things a lot. I always wanted the why. Why do I need to do this? Also when I played the piano, why should I play it this way? Why practice it that way? Why not do it the other way? Especially if I thought that I knew a better way, then God help us, then I really needed to do it that way. But I remember that if someone wouldn't give me an explanation that was to my satisfaction, which is easy to do with most of these things, then I felt super frustrated. And I think because I was questioning so many things, it was kind of like devil's cycle.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Downward spiral.
Downward spiral. How is it called in English? Not
a downward spiral.
It was kind of a downward spiral because people would then kind of already approach it with people like you or our mom or something would approach me already with this like frustration of just do it. Why don't you just do it? And I get it. I kind of get it. But at the same time, I remember my own perspective. Yeah. And I also feel for my younger self.
No, me too. I mean, and I totally understand this, you don't have the space to make your mistakes. That is a big thing and a big difference between the older and the younger sibling.
Yeah.
And I think both perspectives are totally valid and true also. Yeah.
Okay, so the other question that I had, but you already kind of spoke about it, was did we ever get physical?
Yeah, I think when we were young.
When we were really young, but I think quite early on, and I think that's also more of a female thing. I think boys tend to fight much more in a physical way, and girls are much more manipulative. Yeah. And what you were just saying also with with a deep voice, or also like, positively manipulative with the hand and stuff, that we very quickly kind of changed to a more psychological geared combat style, I would say.
For sure. But when we were young, pulling hair and everything was involved. But I think it stopped maybe like literally when I was 12 and you were 8, something like that. Yeah.
And I also remember that what we tried to do is we would kind of try to outsmart each other and win fights by kind of being quicker, saying the points quicker. Or I think that's also kind of how I still have my, like, when I have debates or something, I try to imagine every point that the other person could use against my argument and already kind of like dismantle it before he or she even says it, you know? And I remember that we had a very like debating style of fighting, you know?
Yeah.
I remember that. Right, so another thing I would like to ask you, and this is something I was thinking of, and I'm thinking of more and more now, obviously when we rehearse now, is there was a long time that when we used to play duo, because we started playing duo when I started playing the piano, basically. So
I mean, we've been playing duo forever.
Literally, since my first concert was with you. You know, Old MacDonald has a farm. For 4 hands. So in any case, and there was a time when we were already doing it, like not just in fun little music school concerts, but I would say as professionally as you can do it as a teenager, where maybe I was about 13 and you were 17, or I was 12 and you were 16, where we played, and we also played like important concerts together, where obviously I was at a different point musically than you were. Because at that point, it was like literally also technically I was at a different point. And I very clearly remember we had this one concert when you were, I think you were 16 and I was 12. That was the concert where we played in the Cologne Philharmonie. In the Philharmonie in Cologne, and we played Mozart double concerto with Camerata Bern, and we prepared very
well
consistently for that concert. And I remember we then played this piano concerto or movements from it again and again over the next few years, also in the Turnhalle in Düsseldorf, and we kind of had more engagements with that. And I remember again, I remember this feeling of frustration of you always telling me what to do and me being like, no, don't tell me what to do. I might have a valid opinion as well. And I'm thinking back now, I can also imagine, with the power of self-reflection and hindsight, that maybe you did actually know better. And you were so how did you, or at least sometimes you knew better? How do you remember that?
What I remember very distinctly from that concert in Cologne was that, as you said, we were very well prepared, and it was, kind of obvious that the concert was going to go well with all this preparation that we had done. But I remember being backstage, and you were nervous. And this was still the time where either you felt the nerves or you didn't. You hadn't quite learned to completely combat it. Also for me, the same.
Yeah.
And I wasn't feeling them so much, so I was feeling pretty confident.
Yeah.
And you were nervous. And I remember that I was nervous for you.
You were worried.
I was worried for you, and I was literally... I remember my entire focus in that first movement, because then, I felt like you were so in it.
Yeah.
In that entire first movement, being like, okay, do everything to make Kiveli feel comfortable, what is something that, you still do, obviously, when you play together. But it was so focused, and to the point that, for example, if I was playing a hard passage that after that you play, like, I really made a point to really play it so clearly, to give you the feeling of, okay, here's the beats, come into the beats. And this I remember very well, and I remember being on stage being like, okay, I totally know what you're feeling like, and I have to do something to take this away, to make you feel confident.
Wow.
And I think in the preparation, obviously, I was all kind of also thinking about that, okay, like, I know if the better we prepare, the better it's going to be on stage, the more confident we're going to feel, especially at that age. Preparation is everything.
Of course. If I think about how we used to prepare for concerts, in terms of like time investment compared to how we prepare now, just because we play so many more concerts.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It's incredible. It was literally for about 6 months, we did only that.
If it was a concerto, for sure.
Yeah. That was just the thing we did. I remember for this concerto, we even rented a third piano. So we had, at that point, we had the grand piano, we had our old upright piano that was in the, in another room, so we could practice at the same time. And we rented a third piano to have it in the same room as the grand to practice at the same time.
Yeah.
I have to say I have very, very fond memories from that preparation.
Me too. I really loved it. And I loved the concert as well.
Yeah, because it was something that we looked forward to a lot, because at that point playing with orchestra was very much a rare thing.
Yeah.
So it was like, I don't know, our fourth or fifth orchestra like engagement maximum or something like that. And I loved the piece. And I remember it was a challenge, and because it wasn't necessarily easy. It had tons of stuff in it. It's a normal piano concerto, and I was very young. I was 12 years old. And was I 12 or was I 13?
I think you were 12. Pretty sure.
Something like that, 12, 13. So in any case, and I remember we kind of had this, like, it was basically what I remember is it was much more fun practicing with you than it was practicing by myself.
Yeah.
So usually what happened is we would practice the first half of the day, like our solo repertoire, and then finally be okay. And now we're going to practice
for Mozart.
And also, our mom would leave us much more alone when we practiced this, because she trusted you to take over. So we would also kind of like have this time for ourselves. I really loved that. I really loved this whole experience. So, okay, that is the one very positive thing. But do you also remember situations where you were frustrated and you felt like, because I remember one time you actually telling me kind of under the radar that maybe I should listen to you because I'm 4 years younger than you and 4 years less experienced.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
And I remember taking that very personally and negatively.
I don't remember specific situations where I was frustrated in that preparation. I do remember generally, like in our duo journey, that there were situations where I was really feeling like either you wanted to, brush through it quickly and not work on it. And I was like, we really need to work on this. And that was frustrating, for sure. And also sometimes I felt like I had a musical idea, and then you were like, yeah, but it's not important. And somehow I felt like, I'm saying these very sensible things that are obviously correct, like nothing super crazy. And why are you not doing it?
Right. I also remember like some epic, in hindsight, kind of rehearsal sessions where we would try to, like, again, like the female way of doing it, kind of get our fighting points out musically.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, that is, of course, teenagers, puberty, kind of trying to prove yourself. Like, I remember, like, things would be, like, how sometimes you play a note and I play the same note, so I have to like take away my finger quicker.
Yeah.
Or for example, you start a phrase and I end it. But if, of course, I end it playing the note too loud, your phrase kind of starts sounding unmusical because you've suddenly got that accent where no accent belongs, like things like that. And then, like, we would try to kind of ruin the phrase of the other person.
Or if we disagreed on something, like whether it was supposed to be a shortly articulated note or a long one, and then, like, if you wanted it your way, I was like totally exaggerating and making it sound horrible.
Absolutely. Or the one that was in charge of the pedal. All the power, the una corda or not, the left, the right pedal, like all of it. It was quite fun. I mean, I would say that was the period where we hadn't really yet become old enough to reflect on how to fight in a way that is constructive and kind of solution oriented. And the way it would come out, I would say, was usually in this kind of, manipulative way. However, I would say it's very important to stress that we were always in each other's corner when it was serious.
For
so
sure.
Whenever...
And I just wanted to say also we had a common goal. So like for this whole duo, what was for sure was that we both wanted to be able to play this piece well in concert. Yeah. So I think that also really helped. Yeah. It's not that one of us didn't care.
Yes, we had a common goal, we had common challenges. So, I mean, generally also whenever it was towards like the public or to outside, we were always supporting each other as much as possible.
And also, I think now that you said towards the public and outside, I feel like when we were fighting and someone walked in on us,
we immediately stopped.
We pretended that everything was fine.
That's true.
Yeah, we never were like, oh, Kiveli did that and I did that.
Yeah.
We were always a team on the outside.
That's true.
So like, no matter what happened, we're like,
which is I think why everyone thought we never fought.
Yeah,
like
and then
most
the door
people,
closed, we were like,
that's totally true. That's true. We were also like, even like towards our mother, like even when our mother would come in, we would pretend we were not fighting. Yeah. And kind of immediately like put that front and then like, so basically what I was saying, then I was That's true. That's true. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So what I want to talk about now is basically our biggest fight, which in my view, I mean, we can talk about like the climax of that phase and the pinnacle of our biggest fight.
Also before a duo concert.
Well, I mean, we play duo concerts a lot, so that's why a lot of it happens in that realm. But I want to talk about like I would say the very important and natural reason why there was this big phase of maybe about 2 years where we were not particularly positive towards each other. And I want to talk about it more because I think it's very relevant for also our listeners and maybe siblings amongst our listeners, that I think it's a necessary step, especially for close siblings. And that is, of course, that as you guys have already heard, most of the fights kind of had at its root this kind of dysfunction of you as the older sister trying to tell me what to do and trying to kind of guide me in the right direction, and me kind of trying to be as independent as I could and trying to form my own personality and my own kind of values that I found important and my own strategies to cope with things in life. And I think with us, it was also kind of made more extreme by the fact that I did idolize you in a way that maybe was too much. I had put you up on a pedestal that was miles high, and I idolized you in a way that I really tried to emulate your character for a very long time. And I really tried to be who you were, like in everything, you know, not just how good you were in school or how well you were practicing, whatever, but I tried to, you know, kind of assimilate to your way of being with boys, of being in a group. Like I thought, okay, you were very extrovert, so I had to be very extrovert, you know, you were kind of laughing a lot and a very positive person, so I had to laugh a lot and be a positive person. And there came a point when I was about, I would say 21 or something like that. A bit older even, 22, 23. Yeah. So almost actually quite late, where
But 23 was when we stopped fighting.
Exactly. So at least 21, 22. There came a point where basically I remember I was like having these, I started thinking to myself, quite like in a dramatic way, I don't know who I am. Because who I am is who I think you are, you know?
Yeah.
And this point, and of course, I mean, it wasn't that extreme, but in these moments, everything seems like, you know, and kind of my world came crashing down, and I thought to myself, this is not okay, you know? Like, and also I continuously also felt maybe too much, not taken seriously by you, not being seen as an equal. Like whenever we would have like conversations or whatever fights or disagreements at that point, it would always end up in a way where I would then take a step back and be like, okay, maybe you know better, and you would explain things to me. At least that's how it felt.
Yeah.
So maybe like explain how you felt before like that phase. Did you feel that there's some truth to that, or was it all in my head or something like that?
Well, in that time building up to that
before
explosion.
We actually before, because I mean that explosion happened because we had been kind of distancing from each other gradually more and more.
Because what I want to say is that leading up to that explosion, what I felt was a big like distancing.
Yeah.
And this is what for me was so strange, because I felt like for however long it was, maybe a year or 1.5 years, I was the only one reaching out. I was the only one like asking about things. I was the only one wanting to talk. And sometimes I would get replies like days later, which I know is not the way you reply. Like no one could fool me. And this is what I found super strange. And also I remember having this feeling of being like exhausted, like whenever we saw each other and we started talking and I felt this huge wall, I was just like, this is exhausting. And I'm sure that many things played into that also. And for a part of that time I was also pregnant, so I was just generally probably exhausted. But I was just feeling like at that point, and especially towards the end, like I have no energy for this anymore.
Do you, I mean, we've spoken about it also, but also that to kind of reconfirm it, do you feel that before I kind of, you know, through this whole phase, asserted my independence and my kind of value as an equal, that you did see me as an equal?
So wait, we're talking about when I was like 24, right?
Something there, like 24, 25.
I mean, I think that I think that I didn't completely see you as an equal, because I also think that I was obviously upholding an image towards you that I wanted you to see me as, you know. So like, I think that I was trying to, like I had been all my life, you know, be that perfect sister for you, and that already meant that I didn't see you as an equal, because like I had to be perfect and you had to be normal, let's say. You know? So no, I think that in a way I didn't see you as an equal, but not in a way that I was belittling you in my head.
No.
Not in that way. More in the way that, I don't know how to explain it, but in the way that I wanted to take, you know, a lot on me. But also in certain things, I think it came out as in like, look, I know what's best, you know, just trust me with this.
Yeah. And generally, I mean, I think that my wish at that time was what you say, that you took a lot on yourself. And I would notice that. I would notice that sometimes you were not 100% happy or secure or safe at the moment. And I would approach you trying to be, for the first time, the other way around, your protector. And you just wouldn't let that happen. Like whenever I would get too close or maybe touch a nerve that was true, you would, I wouldn't say belittle me, but you would kind of like play the role of, you don't really know what's happening, you know? And I remember at some point that got obviously frustrating, and that added to I would say, necessary step. I think it's always necessary whenever you've got people up on pedestals. That's not fair to those people. So you need to, at some point you're going to have to put them down, you know, like that's with anybody, whether it's a boyfriend, a best friend, a parent, a sibling, that always, or even an idol, even like an idol or a mentor. People are human, so it's never good to put them up on pedestals. So the point where at some point I would have had to taken you down off that pedestal was coming this one way or another.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening is, with this kind of realization on my part, where I started understanding that I had never really given myself the chance to examine who I want to be, you know, but very much who I thought you were, and that kind of had become my template of who I needed to be. And as we've even established, it wasn't even who you were, but it was even that perfect image that you felt you had to create for my sake and for everyone else's sake. So it was like kind of this really, I would say, like,
it wasn't realistic.
Dissatisfying situation for me, where I was trying to be someone who didn't exist.
Yeah, exactly. It was completely unattainable.
So that was, I would say, the starting point, where it wasn't even that I consciously said, okay, now I'm going to have to distance myself. Yeah. But what basically started happening is, whenever I would encounter situations where I felt even the slightest bit, you know, not being seen as an equal by you, like in situations where it wasn't even what was happening. Like, you know, at that point, of course, this thing had become a huge building, I would say, like pressure pots in my head, kind of more and more and more. And I started distancing myself from you. Yeah. And the thing was, the more I kind of distanced myself, the more you pretended like it didn't bother you, or the more like you pretended like you didn't need me. That was it, basically. Like, you know, like I'm thinking about the situations where you were pregnant, as you said, you were pregnant, and there were situations where obviously I could have helped you out. I mean, this is like now actually really honest admitting, like also bad behavior on my part, definitely, is also I could have obviously helped you out, and you asked, but you never asked me. You know, on the contrary.
So basically, I was pregnant and I had a toddler. So I was pregnant with my second kid, and my first kid was like 1 year old.
I mean, we had established by then that it was my utmost joy to be, you know, with
no, I mean, also
your
like
child and everything.
maybe if for someone who doesn't know our life, and it sounds like we really didn't get along. Actually, we still got along pretty well. And I mean, many people, or probably most people, didn't notice anything. But to us, it was this dramatic.
There was like a big hole between
us. For us, it was huge. No, and during this pregnancy, I mean, not generally, I don't even feel generally, but there was this one super busy week. Yeah. And it was like, I just say I was at my limits. Just physically.
No, I get it.
In terms of like no sleep and workload and kid and just everything. And I mean, I don't remember exactly what happened, but I just, in hindsight, remember thinking like, can you just not support me, and can you just not accommodate me? I didn't even ask to, you know, help. I asked to spend time at the beach. It was during a period where I had to be alone. Exactly.
No, but basically the situation was, because this is a like isolated incident, but the feeling that I had is that you would ask me to do something for you, maybe like, hey, can you do this for me? And then whenever I would be like, hey, you know, maybe we can change it a bit. Like, can I come in half an hour? I have other plans before, but I can, you know, try to change it a bit. And then your reaction will be, no, I actually don't need you. It's fine. I'm going to ask someone else.
Yeah, this was my passive-aggressive
And then in that
reaction,
situation, I was like, oh, okay, so you don't need me. You know, obviously I'm not.
I mean, obviously that was a complete lie. That was just my passive-aggressive reaction. And because then I felt like, okay, if you don't get it, then just, don't even bother at all.
So basically, I mean...
Of course, that was stupid.
Yeah, I mean, the situation was basically, I had, you know, what I wanted is for you to be vulnerable with me. Something that I felt had never really happened before. Like, I was... Since we were kids, the dynamic of our relationship was always very much me coming with my problems to you, and you helping me solve them and supporting me. Yeah. And I remember also quite early on, maybe quite naively with 13 or 14, I was always telling you, like, you can always come to me with your problems. Like, if I can help you with anything, let me know. And I'm here for you. And, and I always wanted this proximity and this kind of give and take.
I mean, you did help me with many problems, even at that young age.
Yeah.
We were not talking about, life or death questions, but many things.
But I just, at that point, I had felt that, it was always a very one-sided kind of stream of helping.
Yeah.
And I had...
Well, because I was not asking.
You were not asking.
As you said, And although I just want to say that before that beach incident, there was one instance where, I mean, you know what I'm talking about, where I called you, where something for me personally, like, super shocking happened, and where
I wasn't there for
was totally vulnerable.
Yes.
And I came out of that meeting, and the first person that I called was you.
You've told me about that many times.
Not my boyfriend, not my parents, you, because this was just my instinct. I mean, I knew something's wrong. I'm going to call Kiveli right now, and it was during the time where things were not going amazingly.
Yeah,
between
that's
us.
true.
And you didn't pick up. I mean, okay, fine, whatever. Then I talked to my boyfriend, but then I was messaging. I was like, call me back, And I think you messaged me like a couple of days later, and I said, can you call me? And you were like, yeah, these days are not so good. I'm with my friends. And I think we talked about it like weeks later.
Yeah.
And this was weird to me.
No, I know. This was, I would say you felt betrayed. And I get it.
And this is something I don't think I've ever done to you.
No, I mean, and to be honest, at that point,
like,
I didn't.
You didn't even realize.
I didn't do it consciously. It wasn't like a conscious, oh, now I'm going to make her wait. It was nothing like that.
You didn't even know what was happening.
I didn't know what was happening, and
when you knew, you didn't know how serious it was, or something like this.
No, it was just I didn't know what was happening, and I was so like at that point I was so much already consumed in this mentality of I need to kind of become independent and have my own independent way that, I didn't even realize what was, the extent of the situation until actually years later where you told me that was really, hurtful to you as a thing that happened. So, and I've already apologized, but I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you because I realized that it was a very very intense thing for sure in that situation.
Now I would just message you. I'm super vulnerable right now. Call me now.
Exactly. Yeah. So okay. So now I'm
crying.
I would say let's now find ourselves now at the scene of our most spectacular fight, and then to also kind of say how we got away from it and why now I feel like we're at the best place ever.
So the scene was...
Shall I? You want to?
I mean, we can both talk about it. I mean, basically the general situation is just we had this duo concert in Sweden. We were on a little tour in the south of Sweden, and I think it was the first one, right? It was the first concert. And we had rehearsed. The rehearsal went like semi-great, I would say.
Basically, wait, let me set it up. Basically, we had come off of the fact that we hadn't managed to rehearse properly before the new pieces before going to Sweden, because I mean, this is like, obviously at this point we're being a bit petty with each other and everything, because Danae had obviously a kid and another kid on the way. At that point, whenever we were rehearsing, I would always come to your place, and it would always be like I would accommodate whenever you've got time, which was totally fine. And that one time I'd said like, hey, it's really difficult for me. Can you come? And you said, no, I cannot come. I'm sorry, I cannot come. And I'm like, I've come every single time. And you said, no, I'm sorry, I cannot come. Then we won't rehearse. And I remember feeling like, okay, so obviously, and I already felt like.
But in my defense, it wasn't like I was chilling at home. Like I actually couldn't come.
No, I know, but
I had rehearsals.
And the situation is, I actually couldn't really come either. It would have been very, so.
I mean, I think it was actually impossible for both of us.
But we at this point, I think we would have either found a way to a crazy midnight situation, and one of us would have been happy to do it, or we'd just been like, hey, it's not possible. Don't worry, it'll be fine. But the way this phone call had ended, it was kind of like it
was weird.
It was weird. So then we flew to Sweden. We were rehearsing. We were already kind of having to rehearse in a very concentrated and focused manner, and the rehearsal was already loaded with like, you know, pressure and not that much positivity.
Not pressure for the concert, but like pressure against each other. Yeah, exactly. So we were, we knew that the concert was going to be fine. I think none of us was really worried about the concert.
No.
It was just that we were so annoyed with each other.
Yeah.
The rehearsal was what Kiveli described before, with musical nagging all the way. Everything. And so then we were backstage, and it was this final hour before the concert, getting ready, and we got into the usual discussion, and you said everything that you also said before, you know, you don't see me as an equal, you always want to teach me something when we fight. And I also told you, like, I'm exhausted, I cannot talk about this. And I remember, this is what I remember most, I said, let's talk about this again after, you know, I've given birth, because right now I have no energy for this.
I'm just going to go ahead. You didn't say this. Maybe let's talk about this again after I've given birth.
No, because I thought that was pretty intense.
No, absolutely no. Basically, it was in November, I think.
Yeah.
And you were giving birth in January, February, exactly. And basically, you told me, I don't want to have another conversation like this with you until I've given birth. And you also said until you've gone to therapy.
Oh yeah, that was a huge one.
So these were like, and I remember you told me that, and like, you know, obviously we'd like kind of hyped each other up, and we were kind of now using a more passionate volume to discuss with each other, which
we use a passionate volume already in normal conversation.
Exactly. and it's not like we're not screaming to each other like in an aggressive way. It's just like, you know, it's just loaded up and heated and everything. And I'd say the louder of the two of us,
for sure.
Also, like in normal life, not like also
even when we're having
also happy loud. Yeah. I'm like happy loud. I'm generally loud, I would say. So I'm working on it, kind of. So in any case, and I remember you told me this comment. You said, "Kiveli, I don't want to talk to you again until I've given birth." And then talk. Hi, we're ready for you.
We're ready for you.
And I was like.
And we looked at each other, and it was like, okay, so let's go on stage now. And we didn't exchange another word before we went on stage, because there was no time to exchange a word.
So basically, we just went down.
And this is now the miraculous thing.
Yes.
Because first of all, the concert went well.
And I felt the miraculous thing is that we kind of musically
that's what I mean.
Became friends again.
Exactly. So the concert was totally fine. And after that, there were no hard feelings.
Well, basically, I can tell you exactly what happened. So basically, I felt during the concert, like, you know, I remember, I don't know how you felt during that concert, but I remember it actually quite well.
Yeah.
And I remember during the concert feeling like, because we had kind of pulled it off, we had... even though we hadn't had that much time to rehearse, we kind of found a common interpretation very quickly. And, you know, like every time we would breathe together, every time we would kind of follow each other's spontaneity together, it would remind me of this, you know, year-long base of connection we share.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, no, okay, we do still have common ground. Obviously, I mean, if we're able to play a concert together, we must still have common ground.
I feel like it's this common goal that we were also saying, you know, in our childhood fights played such an important role. And it was the same thing, because no matter what we said before, we had each other's backs on stage. Yeah. No one wished for the other one to look bad on stage.
Exactly.
Definitely not. We've never wished that for each other. So I feel like this really, I mean, music does connect us. We are very connected to music. And this really connected us. And I remember with every piece that finished and with every bow and then, you know, going back to the next piece, I was feeling calmer and calmer.
Yes.
And you know how, like, when we finish a piece and then we bow, sometimes we say a funny remark to the other one, whatever. And, you know, something, I don't remember what, but something happened and we said something. And I somehow felt
it was like a release. It was a release. Yeah.
And going off that stage, I felt like, you know, the core of the problem was not resolved.
No, absolutely not.
But the fight was totally resolved.
The fight was over. And what also helped was that at that point, he was literally just 1 year old son, and he had just like kind of learned to not really walk very well, but he was kind of like almost walking, like holding one hand, and he had on this panda outfit.
Yeah.
With like it had like a hood that had like panda ears on it, and he came and he just like gave his most incredible smile and was just like and looked at us, and it was just the most, and I think that melted everything, melted all the ice that we had in our hearts.
An innocent child smile.
Yes. So this was, I would say, our most recent and like big fight because it was really about something. It wasn't about like, I want to practice 5 minutes less. It had a real problem at its core.
Yeah.
And how I felt was that, so that was in November. And after that, I would say more distance came generally in the next 2-3 months because as we said, we hadn't resolved anything. Obviously, we had a way of communicating with each other that was in a way functional and worked, but there was no proximity that much. Mm-hmm. And then on one fateful day in January, it was like Danae's week where we knew that she would give birth to her second son.
Yeah.
And what happened was that it was the most amazing thing because I had stayed with you for a week because it was like not sure when he would come, or I'd stayed with you for a couple of days for some reason.
Yeah, I feel like we were even rehearsing something.
Maybe we were rehearsing something because at that point we still didn't live together. Yeah. So I had my own apartment in Berlin.
Because I'm saying that because he came early.
He came early, yeah.
We couldn't have been expecting him
No,
before.
but I was there, I think, because I was there and we were rehearsing and I left your house around maybe 9 o'clock in the evening or something like that.
And basically from the hour you left, I started having contractions.
You started having
like
contractions.
Light ones. Yeah.
And I remember you were kind of texting me on my way back home. You were like, I'm having contractions, but we're not really sure what's happening.
It could take 3 days.
And it took about 1 hour from your apartment to my apartment.
Exactly, yeah.
And I remember that I was home and you said, and it was not planned at all that I would be at your birth.
No, exactly. That's the other thing. It wasn't planned at all. I mean,
because on the first time I hadn't been there,
yeah.
And the second time, I mean, with the state we were in,
it was actually nothing that I could imagine.
Exactly.
Going into it, and also we hadn't discussed.
We hadn't discussed. On the contrary, was more like you don't want me there.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I don't know what happened, but basically you said, "Hey, maybe you want to come back." And you said your boyfriend would feel more comfortable if you were there. Which I don't know what happened there, or whether we should credit your boyfriend for kind of bringing us back together.
Well, I mean, what happened was, so my contractions were getting harder. And it was kind of clear that something was going to happen that night.
That you were going to give birth.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, who knows? But, somehow it was going to start the whole process. And I remember thinking, okay, he's there, but it would be nice to also have you there. Like, and then I asked him and I said, what do you think if Kiveli would also come? And he was like, yes, great, because he's very sensitive. And anyway, he was very happy to also have someone else.
Yeah.
And then I remember telling him, okay, do you want to text her? Like, do you want to tell her, to come?
So, and anyway.
But did he actually?
No, you texted me. Okay. No, you just said, but you said that he would like me to be there. You basically said like, hey, he would be more comfortable if you were there. And our mother was staying home with the young one.
Exactly.
The older one.
Exactly.
So I remember, and obviously, was like, of course,
and I remember it was the last and
you
were like,
train.
if I come, I have to, like, you have to tell me now, like within 2 minutes. I remember,
and I remember
otherwise you can't make
exactly. So I literally just arrived home and I left immediately, and I came back and it was
most unnecessary journey ever.
So then, and I remember
you came back, and I think we were literally waiting for you to go to the hospital.
To go to the hospital because everything. I mean, he was there within 5 hours, literally.
It was super
of the beginning of your
and
contractions.
I think if we hadn't been waiting for you, we would have maybe even left earlier. But obviously, I mean, we were waiting.
And I remember, because during your first birth, I was in Molivos doing the festival. That's why I'd never, ever seen someone obviously go through contractions. And I remember you were like, and you were there. And I think what clicked, and maybe that was what clicked inside of me was, it was a quite natural situation where I was,
definitely wasn't artificial.
No, I mean, naturally where I was there to support you. Like I had no other role than to support you. Like that's what I was there for. Like
I was the vulnerable one.
Exactly. And I remember I was seeing you and you were, and you are very much someone who does not show pain or discomfort or kind of, any kind of negative
Definitely
emotion
was showing it
towards
there.
the outside world. And I remember also in the beginning, like I would see you when you had these contractions, you were kind of just like breathing very deeply, and I immediately understood when it shifted from, you were kind of breathing and it was working for you, and you were breathing and it stopped working for you and you were breathing for our benefit. I kind of understood that switch. It went from like you were doing like your really calm face and everything to the second where you were looking down, you were breathing and your whole face were like scrunched up in pain. And I remember that you were like, and I remember I was sitting like, Danae, it's fine. You can, be loud. It's okay. And you were like, no, I'm okay. No, I'm okay. And then you'll be fine again. And like and I remember this like kind of when we were in the car towards the hospital.
I'm so happy that you were there at the birth.
and we were like on the way to our hospital, and especially because your boyfriend is such a calm person and kind of like, keeping it all inside himself. And I was like, I wanted to be the person who said like, you don't have to keep anything. Like, this is the time to scream.
But I have to say, I think for me, it actually was helpful.
I know, but
to
like
be collected.
I know, but I was just seeing you like these like breaths were basically, they weren't even breaths anymore. They were kind of like earth-shattering little earthquakes within your body.
What I remember is when we had made it to the hospital and we were in that birthing room or whatever, and like in between contractions, obviously you feel pretty normal, and you took a picture or something to send it to our parents or to our mom. I don't know. And I remember for that picture, I was like, posing in a cool way, like with a peace sign or something. And you were like, Danae, can you please not pose during your birth? Like, it's okay. Can you please not smile and pose for the photo?
And what I remember just the most was that, I love that we're sharing your birthing history here. So in any case, what I remember is that in the like last few seconds or like in the last minute, there was this tiny complication because the doctors lost your baby's heartbeat.
I mean, it was actually not a complication. It was just a typical like hospital situation where they lost the monitor of the child. So nothing was wrong.
No.
They just didn't have the monitor
So basically
anymore.
his head was out. But it wasn't out. No, it wasn't out. Basically like it was super close. Everything was out, but they had lost the heart, and basically they said something like, okay, if he doesn't come out with the next 2 pushes, we're gonna have to use the like the suction device.
Yeah, exactly.
And I remember I was like looking at them like, what are you guys even talking about? And I was like, and I remember I like went down. I don't know why, but I remember it as if it were yesterday. When I was like, okay, Danae, you're gonna push now twice, super hard. You can do this, like we're gonna do it together. Use man, and then
and actually that moment, because this is like this is getting so so intimate, but for me, this is what I was most scared about for both births, was this end period where they threaten to cut you open or do whatever. And this is what I wanted to avoid at all costs. And when the doctor was like, we're gonna have to do this now, and I was just like, and I had actually told my boyfriend, if they start talking about that, just make sure that they don't. This is what I mean. Not realistic, but and I remember looking at him and he was, so confused anyway. He was just like, okay, we can do this. And I was so happy that you were there because I felt like you were somehow the authority in the room.
I'm almost crying thinking about the situation. It was like, and then you were, and I remember I was like putting everything I had to like,
and you were like, okay, just do it. And because you were like, you said like, I remember you said to me, it's not gonna happen. Just do it. Just push right now. It's okay. Just do this little thing. Just do this last little thing.
Just push one. Just a little push. And then the funniest thing was obviously that then with like the second push, he came out like in one whoosh. And I remember I was like, Danae, he's out. And you were like, I know.
I felt that.
Like, I am aware that he's out. And I was like, Danae, he's out. And I just remember I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. No, it was amazing.
It was incredible.
And then he was, and that really bonded us.
Yeah, and from that point, it was like as if this switch had shifted.
Yeah.
Literally, like from that point onwards, I remember everything kind of went back in sync, and it still took us 6 months and then another year to talk about what had happened.
Yeah.
But kind of it like shifted instantaneously.
Totally. I think if you're, going through such an extreme situation together, that really is something very special. And I think it's not it is probably common that sisters are there, but it's not, the norm.
Yeah.
And I think that for us also, because it was like an unmedicated birth, that makes it a bit more extreme.
Yeah.
I think that for us, this was... It was a really beautiful thing.
And I think actually now thinking about it, the reason was that I had felt what a big step it was for you to rely on me in that situation. And somehow, like, without even thinking about it consciously, like something subconsciously clicked that maybe made me feel like you do respect my opinion and, like you do.
I always respected your opinion.
But you know what I mean? Like, on like you, in a situation where you could have not called me, you called me, and I was there and you let me be there for you. Yeah. So, and then about, I would say 1 year later came the first lockdown. So now we're actually very close to our present situation. And I would say during that first lockdown, we had a couple of like long conversations.
Or like also 100.
Or like 100 conversations. But I mean, I remember specifically like some that went like way late. Yeah. Where we finally, caught up what we'd already emotionally kind of changed.
And we went into every detail.
We went into every detail. Yeah. So what do you think, like what came out of that in terms of like what changed within our relationship and why is it now so good?
I think the fundamental thing that changed is the understanding for the other person's perspective. I felt like up to then we very much had our own perspective and felt like when there was no understanding, this is unfair, like why don't you get it? And I think that for the first time there, we really fully understood and respected and accepted the other person's perspective. Like I fully understand where you're coming from and you fully understand where I'm coming from.
I think that it's very easy that when you are fighting with someone, and that's both on like a micro level and a macro level, it's very easy to kind of pretend like the other person wants something completely different than you. Like, they are just following their own goal, and that goal is definitely opposite to your own goal. Like that kind of taking that almost as a truism without really reflecting on it. And most of the times when people argue, it's kind of interesting to see because most of the times the goal is the same. And it's just they argue about how to get to that goal. Yeah. And if people would remember, as we then remember, that we actually had the same goal, which was to, love each other for who we are and respect each other and interact with each other in a way that is harmonious and positive and beneficial for us both. Once we reminded ourselves of that, then the only question that remained was, okay, with what strategy, with what kind of techniques are we going to maintain that? Yeah. And I remember I came out of that and 2-3 things changed for me that were really fundamental. The first thing was that within, of course, those 2 years of more distance, I had answered that question for myself. Like, who am I really? And who am I also apart from you? Yeah. What parts of the character that I am were kind of fakely assumed from you, and which characteristics were truly who I am? That was very important. So I felt like I had my own identity truly. I had acquired my own identity. The second thing was that I felt that there was a real shift in how you viewed me. Like you really did stop seeing me as someone to mother, and you saw me as an equal, where sometimes I can teach you some things and sometimes you can teach me something. And that was the main difference for me. And I think on the other hand, what I saw is that all the things that I sometimes felt that made me feel misunderstood came out of a place of love and protection and wanting the best for me. And just the only thing that kind of maybe I hadn't communicated well was that the best for me is also letting me make my own mistakes.
Yeah, for sure. I think that I definitely stopped seeing you as a substitute daughter and definitely started seeing you completely as an equal, fully in everything. And also very much more asked for your opinion, asked for your advice, and asked for help. I mean, I would say that I asked for help much more often.
I mean, absolutely,
now.
Absolutely.
And I think that was very important. And what I said with like understanding your perspective, like understanding how difficult it was for you to always be protected by me. You know, that wasn't always a good thing. And yeah, I think that's definitely what changed for me. And I also feel from my side that somehow you started taking me more seriously or more at face value, not just because I say it, that's what it is, but actually considering it. Exactly.
Yeah. So this is like, I would say, absolutely fully our emotional journey, fighting wise. I think it's also very interesting because the reason why I'm saying it is everyone who's ever heard us in the other room organizing our festival has afterwards come up to us and said, like, it's so interesting how you guys organize together and how you guys interact. Most of all, our father, who said that, you know, in kind of the way we reach agreements, it's so funny because he feels like we disagree so many times, and at the end, we're always both super happy with the result.
Yeah.
And that is true.
Yeah, that's true.
So I wanted to kind of like, for the end, ask, what would you say are your top 3 or 5, let's see how far we go, tips on finding common ground professionally? Specifically like with me, but maybe kind of then to be able to apply that to a more general basis.
Yeah. I think number 1 for me is to trust the other person.
I would have said the exact same thing.
Yeah,
yes.
Because I feel like even when we fundamentally disagree, I never would let myself think, and I never think that, you know, your argument is stupid or anything like that. I feel like you have a very valid reason, and I also feel that you think that I have a very valid reason.
And to add to that, which means that when we disagree on something, and of course it's like, you know, it's a practical thing. That's what I'm saying in the festival thing is like, you know, should we program this piece or the other, you know? There is a part of me that says maybe Danae knows better.
Exactly.
You know, like I'm considering the fact that maybe your idea is better than mine, just as much as I'm considering that my own idea. So it's basically truly trusting that the other person has valid perspectives.
Yeah. And I think kind of what goes also hand in hand with that is to be able to let the other person convince you. You know how sometimes when you have a discussion, you're at a point where you cannot be convinced because just whatever anyone says, it's no. But
like one of my favorite people in the world, Jordan Peterson, one of his rules is also when you talk to someone, expect that he can tell you something that you don't know.
Exactly. And that's
not verbatim, that's not a quote, but that's the gist of the rule.
No, but this is exactly what I mean, that if we have a different idea from the other one, then we are totally ready to be convinced, and if we are convinced, we are then never second guessing or thinking, oh, actually I'm unhappy with this result. Then we are really agreeing this is the result.
So that is already kind of the second point.
Yeah, and I think the result one could kind of be a third point, that whatever you agree on.
That's what I mean. That is the second point that I mean. Yeah. That's the second point where whatever, like in the end, when we decide that we're going to do something, it never subsequently feels like a compromise.
Exactly.
It was a compromise in the moment.
Yes.
But subsequently, it feels that was the best. The best possible result.
And I feel like as soon as it's been decided on a final level, it's never questioned again.
Exactly.
We never go back and say, oh, but what if...
I wish that we would have gone with mine or your way.
Even if something goes wrong with it. Yeah. Even if, you know, maybe objectively speaking, the other thing would have been better. As soon as it's decided, we're a team and we work with that.
Exactly.
We've commonly decided it. There's nothing else to question it. Yeah. And if I think, for example, about this year's festival program, I don't even know exactly who picked out which piece. This is our program. This is what we're dealing with. Yeah. Done.
Then the third thing I would say is be willing and able to compromise. Yeah. That is the thing that I find is so easy with us, because we know that if we are really at opposite ends of one point, there's no question that we expect one person to move all the way to the other side. We already know, okay, we're going to find a middle ground. How about this? How about that? Like, it's immediately, we're then only disagreeing about which concessions to make rather than whether we even want to make concessions.
Yeah.
I think that is so important, and of course that ties in also to the second point, and then don't view compromises as sacrifices, but view them as a success. And that is the other thing that is so important.
And maybe one more thing that comes to my mind is to not take things personally. So if there's some kind of disagreement, or if someone says...
So interesting, I had exactly the same.
If someone says that, I don't like this idea, doesn't mean you're stupid, it doesn't mean you're not creative, it just means this idea doesn't resonate with me right now. And I also feel like we're never offended. We're never offended when we discuss things and when we disagree. It's just, okay, this is where we're starting. This is our starting point. Let's find a way together. And I think this is, of course, harder if you don't know the person as well as we know each other, because we know that we have our best interests at heart. We know that we're not trying to hurt each other, but that we're trying to do what we think is best. So this is, of course, a good place to start. But I think this is so important because for me personally, when I'm having professional discussions that are a bit harder, I feel like people get offended
so easily. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree. And then the last point, which is similar to the fourth, but I want to even take it one step further, is we take ourselves very lightly, which means that on the one hand, we don't get offended, but on the other hand, we constantly make jokes. We immediately also are, self-deprecating when we obviously didn't really do something very well. Or I know if I have... Or you have, because it's sometimes also you, have forgotten to write an email.
Of course.
Sometimes it's you. or something like that. It's not like, leave it there. Oh, sorry, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm going to do it now. So we take ourselves very, very lightly and keep it light during our discussion. So, whenever we have an intense thing, someone's going to make a joke and then we're like super, super laughing. And then we get back to it. Okay, those endorphins have rushed through our body, and it's always much easier to then, tackle the challenge again. So that, I think that's a good list. So wait, let's keep it listy. So the first thing is trust. Yeah. Trust that the other person has something important to say, something that you might not know.
Yeah.
The second thing is...
Let yourself be convinced.
No. The second thing is the compromise. So the second thing is be willing and able to compromise. And with that goes together and view compromise as a success and not as something that you have to sacrifice. Yeah. Then the fourth thing is don't take things personally. Know that, you're trying to do the best for the project. And the last thing is keep it light. Make jokes, keep it positive, so you're actually enjoying the work.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
It's our little manual to fight.
Exactly, to finding common ground. And now lastly, let's finish with a story about each other.
Our stories.
So do you want to start or shall I start?
Okay, I can start.
Okay.
So I thought of a little story about Kiveli that doesn't have anything to do with a fight she had with me, but a fight that she had in kindergarten. And I just want to say this from my perspective. So what I remember is that our mother picked me up from school and she kind of had a serious face and she was like, Danae, something happened. Like something really bad happened with Kiveli. And what had happened basically was that Kiveli got into a fight in kindergarten.
But I would like to say I didn't get into lots of fights. It was kind of an exception.
I even don't know if you got into a fight or if some kid just randomly did this. I mean, something happened.
No, I remember that fight. I remember the fight.
So the end of the fight was that Kiveli was hurled into a nail that was sticking out. I mean, also a very strange thing in kindergarten to be sticking out from some piece of wood because they were building something or constructing something. And it was above her eye, above her eyebrow.
Here.
Yeah, I mean, just for the people only
above
listening.
The eyebrow.
Above the eyebrow. It was stuck in the face. And so the kindergarten teacher, I remember, said, everything's fine. It was not stitched, but stuck together.
It was glued together.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, now you don't see anything basically. But of course it sounded like a horror story. And our mom was, I think, on the inside very worried, but on the outside very calm and collected. I mean, she really shines in times of crisis.
Yeah.
And and I remember she actually prepared me. She was like, Danae, don't worry. Everything's totally fine. Kiveli's totally fine. She might look a bit strange above the eye. Don't worry about it at all. It's going to be totally fine. I remember then seeing you, and I remember you were so proud. I just remember, after all this preparation of, Kiveli could be a bit weird, she could be a bit tired or whatever. Kiveli was like, oh my God, this happened. And then the doctor glued me and it was so cool. And you were loving it, basically. So yeah, that was my little story.
I mean, from the fight perspective, I remember basically that someone was teasing me and I was teasing them back. It was like a teasing thing, and we're teasing each other. And I do remember that I had also kind of like pushed them, but as I said, I was not a very physical fight person generally. So it was it definitely wasn't like a big thing. But what had happened was that basically he took my sleeve and I took the hand out of the sleeve, thinking that if I took it out, he couldn't, touch me in a way. And then, I also, without wanting it, he kind of let go of the sleeve, and I totally lost balance. And I remember even seeing the nail before it hit me. And it's one of these things where things go in slow motion. And what I don't remember is the pain. I don't remember the pain at all. I don't even remember fear or sadness or anything. I remember immediately the next scene I remember is the doctor telling me he's going to glue it together, and me being fascinated by the fact that you're able to glue skin together. That is basically what I remember. So my story is also, I think, one story that illustrates the extent of Danae's discipline and conscientiousness on levels unknown to most teenagers.
I know what you're going to say. Oh my God.
Levels unknown to, I would say, normal young people across the globe. So because our dad lived in America for many years, so we would visit him in America every year. And our dad lived in San Diego, which is close to Los Angeles, where many times premieres happen, or meet and greets happen, or generally just Hollywood stars live. So that was at the time where I was probably about 12 or 13, and you were 16, 17, and Harry Potter was huge. And my first celebrity crush was Daniel Radcliffe. I was obsessed with Daniel Radcliffe. I was obsessed with Harry Potter, but at that point it was very difficult to separate Harry Potter from Daniel Radcliffe. To the point where I was even thinking of sending him letters and things like that.
Love it.
So we were in San Diego, which is 2 hours by car from Los Angeles, and there was a premiere happening. And I found out that there was a premiere happening of I don't know which one, the 5th, the 6th, not the 7th, but there was a premiere happening, and he was going to be there. So I had kind of almost convinced my dad to drive me there, or kind of combine it with an LA trip, going shopping or something. And we hadn't practiced that day yet. Now we're talking about, when I say we practiced every day. So missing one day of practice wasn't a big thing. It was literally missing one day of playing scales and etudes and practicing one movement of the piece we were, learning at that time. So I was telling Danae, let's go to LA. Daniel Radcliffe, we might see him. At that point, I was imagining that just being in LA was a guarantee of meeting him, So basically I was saying, we might see him. And then I looked at me Kiveli, come on, be reasonable. And then she just looked at me with this sense of, now I'm going to give you the comment. Do you want to go and see Daniel Radcliffe, or do you want to practice one more hour? And I looked at her I want to go see Daniel Radcliffe, hello? And she looked at me as if I was from another universe, obviously, between the choice of meeting your celebrity crush and getting one more scale in, you're going to choose the scale, obviously.
For me, I was baffled when this little method, because I thought that this was really a killer argument. I was just look, do you want to practice, or do you seriously want to go see Daniel Radcliffe? What are you going to do? You're not going to practice to see Daniel Radcliffe in Hollywood? And I thought that your answer was going to be, yeah, of course. I want to practice. And when you were well, actually, I want to see Daniel Radcliffe, I was just I was so what do I say now? I mean, if that didn't work, what else is going to work?
Anyway, it's one of my favorite stories about you because you were like, you thought that you just won. You know, you were like, obviously you're going to practice, right? And I thought like, what are you even talking about? Daniel Radcliffe, like my love affair with Daniel Radcliffe, it could be starting in 3 hours, okay?
Oh my God. Yeah, good times.
Yes, very good times. So that concludes today's episode.
Yes. And the next episode is going to be about our musical journey. So today we actually already talked a little bit about some piano stories, but
I think that, you know, we've never really very, very openly spoken about like the emotional side of our musical journey and how it felt to be super young, playing concerts very early.
Basically everything connected to piano, to the performing pressure with the audience, but also what it was like for us to have this in our lives. So definitely tune in next week.
And sending lots of love to all of you and see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
You're listening to The Sister Trill with Danae and Kiveli.